Okay. Hello, I am Anna Froling, a member of LWV Rochester, and I would like to welcome all of you tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing at a later time, to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners for tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library for their help. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization active at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we at the League do study and take stands on issues, we never endorse or oppose political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of LWV Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum. And the sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of the candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from LWV Rochester, the Post-Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce, and members of our audience. You are welcome to submit as many written questions for the candidates as you like. Just hold up the cards as you finish them, and a League volunteer will collect them throughout the forum. If you are watching the live stream, you may email questions to lwvrochester@lwvmn.org. Tonight's volunteers who are managing the questions are also League volunteers. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Given our format, your questions must relate to all candidates. Questions that fall in the same general area or which have been addressed in opening statements may be consolidated to allow the moderator to cover as many topics as possible in the time allotted. We appreciate questions that are forward-looking rather than a review of past issues. If the answer was unclear to you, please feel free to submit a follow-up question or ask the candidate after the forum. Cards become the property of the League of Women Voters Rochester. As there is never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time and settings such as this, if your questions are not addressed tonight, please feel free to contact the candidates directly. You can find the candidates' contact information online at vote411.org or the Minnesota Secretary of State site, or Google them. We'd like to thank all candidates for running for office, for offering to serve their community, and for the enormous amount of time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features the candidates for Olmsted County Commissioner District 4. Candidates for this seat are Brian Mueller and Kindra Raymaker. Welcome. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statement. The candidates will then respond in turn to questions provided by LWV Rochester, this evening's partners, and by the audience. Candidates will have 75 seconds to answer each question. The candidates will then have 2 minutes each to make a closing statement. It isn't necessary to use the entire time for your answer, but please finish your sentence when your time is up. We would like to cover as many questions as possible. Each candidate also has 3 30-second rebuttal cards. These can be used at any point after each candidate has answered the question. Only 1 rebuttal card may be used per question. Please put the card in the basket after you have used it. I would like to remind the audience to remain quiet during the forum. Hold your applause until the end of the forum and to turn off all your electronic devices. The timekeepers tonight are LWV Rochester member Eric Voldal and also Winona State student Camille Plaguey. Thank you. Questions will be screened by LWV Rochester members Kathy Magerling and Dee Voldal. Asking questions will be Randy Peterson from the Post-Bulletin and Jonathan Kroll from the Chamber of Commerce. We will now hear the opening statements from each candidate. Candidates, you will have 2 minutes to speak. Candidate Raymaker, you will go first.
Thank you so much to our sponsors tonight. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you also to my opponent, because It's very important that people lean in and serve their communities. My name is Kindra Raymaker, and I have a very strong connection to rural and farm communities. And I also have a very strong connection to thriving cities. A little bit about myself. I was born in Spring Valley, and my family has always owned a hobby farm. So I grew up with gardening and, growing your own food, butchering your own meat. And I'll connect that to a story coming up. Professionally, I've worked at Mayo Clinic for 20 years. I also did leave the community for a few years and got some for-profit consulting experience, which was really important to get that for-profit perspective. And I have broad leadership experience. I have experience in HR, accounting, finance, and most recently supply chain. I think people they really misunderstand the position of county commissioner. When I've knocked on doors, I hear a lot about roads. Everybody understands that, we have to maintain our roads, and that's what they talk to me about. But the county is about more than just roads and development and land use. And if you don't have the perspective of all the other scope of what's involved in the county, and you're not ready to be innovative and forward-thinking and make sure that we understand the needs of the small businesses in the small communities to help make sure that we have sustainable supply chains and inclusive rural businesses, our county won't thrive the way we need it to. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller.
Good evening. My name is Brian Mueller, candidate for Olmsted County Commissioner, District 4. With 18 years as a Rochester Township Supervisor, I dealt with budgeting, equipment purchasing, full-time employees, planning and zoning, road maintenance, and I also have an interest in local government. I believe what has prepared me for this seat is having built and operated an independent business for 30 years, which for the most part has been a one-man heavy equipment repair service. I've had to deal with all aspects of being self-employed. That includes dealing with people of all types and temperaments. Problems at times can seem overwhelming, but in the end, it all needs to work out because the only other option is failure. As anyone who has successfully ran a small business can tell you, it is an education you can't buy. It's about thinking on your feet and solving whatever challenge comes along. I may not be completely versed on what comes up here, but I promise the constituents of District 4 that I will use the knowledge I have gained by experience to learn the issues and work towards a common sense, practical solution or decision.
Thank you. So we will now have the first questions. We'll move on to questions, and the first questions come from the League. First question comes from the League of Women Voters, and then it'll be post bulletin in the chamber. The question, and candidate Raymaker, you go first, and actually candidate Mueller, you go first, and then it'll be candidate Raymaker. Sorry about that. And here's the question. As a county commissioner, what measures, if any, would you support to reinforce or ensure voter confidence in our elections?
With the experience I've had in elections at the township level, checks and balances keep the vote accurate. There's really not much margin for error when it comes at that level. Any discrepancy needs to be reported to the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you. Candidate Raymaker?
So specifically, I would support measures for education about the process. Our elections are very safe. I myself have volunteered to be an election judge. My family members volunteer to be election judges. And when you are an election judge, you see your neighbors on both sides of the aisle politically. Our elections are very safe. I would support education because I think that if we don't spend a little bit of money doing education of our community, we have the risk that some people who are being very, very disruptive could actually cost the county more money by insisting that things that are not actually happening are going on, and we'll have to address it as a bigger issue.
Thank you. And now we'll go on to the Post Bulletin, and Randy Peterson, I'll have you ask your first question.
District 4 sits largely outside Rochester in a county that has several commissioners who represent Rochester residents. How will you make sure unique rural concerns are being addressed by the board as a whole?
Yes. Candidate Raymaker, you're first. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Certainly. I actually think that this isn't as much of a problem as maybe people perceive it is. Every county commissioner, I think, comes to the table from a county perspective, and that includes rural and urban voters. The economic success of the city depends on the workforce that comes from the greater county as well as what's in the city. So I will make sure that rural specific issues are considered, but I think that many of the sitting county commissioners and many of the candidates, as I've learned, as I've listened to others that are running, actually really care about rural and urban issues.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller?
Yes, with part of the county actually being in the southern part of the city, there is a lot of city that is involved with the whole, I'm not saying that right. The county needs to focus on smaller cities, the rural areas, for the infrastructure, and keep their infrastructure up for these bedroom communities that do need to catch up with Rochester expanding.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the Chamber's question, and Jonathan Krull. And it will be candidate Mueller first and then candidate Raymaker.
Affordable housing is an issue across the country, and Olmsted County is no stranger to it. What role do you believe that the county should play in addressing the issue of affordable housing?
I need to educate myself first, and then I can give you better information. I'm just not that familiar with it, sorry.
Thank you. Candidate Raymaker?
Certainly. The county does have a few levers that they can pull in this space to help with affordable housing. They get, I believe, around $3 million worth of funds that they can choose to create programs, choose to invest. And so I think that the county's role is to really make sure that if there are opportunities for public-private partnerships, that we do that, that we are encouraging and not inhibiting innovation. I think that sustainability and innovation in the building process is a way that we could hopefully help to create housing that is more affordable, because I think that we know that building brand new housing is just too expensive. So my supply chain background kind of makes me want to figure out how we enable people to drive the cost out of building. There have been some great models of that as well in terms of like land trusts and things like that. So there are always other innovative cities and counties that you can look to as examples and models.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to audience questions. We'll have several audience questions, and they're both from online and in-person audience. So this is an in-person audience question. Do you support an overpass at County Road 44 and Highway 14? And candidate Raymaker, you'll go first, and then candidate Mueller.
So I will commit to understanding the overall budget priorities of the county first, and the budget specifically for transportation, and what overall county needs happen before I commit to supporting a single project. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't support such an overpass. I would just need to evaluate, like anybody spending for their family, priorities for financial spending matter.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller?
Yes, I would definitely promote an overpass at that intersection. That is a really dangerous intersection. With the city expanding at the rapid rate it's no time to put this project off. I would definitely push for the state to get the funding to get this project done. We're running out of highways, and we got to keep going.
Thank you. Next question will be Candidate Mueller and then Candidate Raymaker. And the next question is on taxes. How does the property, and this is an online question from an audience, how does the property tax levy work, and how does it fit into the overall budget process?
At the county level what happens is the department heads bring forth the budgets that they believe they're going to need for that year, and it has gone through with the county commissioners, and they budget or decide back and forth what the budget's going to be and how it is going to affect the property taxes, and then make a decision on the budgets.
Thank you. Candidate Raymaker?
Could I have you repeat the question so I make sure I hear the whole thing?
Yep. How does the property tax levy work, and how does it fit into the overall budget process?
Well, I'm not sure of the specific percentages, but a portion of the county budget comes from property taxes, and a portion of the county budget comes from the state. A large part of the county budget comes from the state. Tax levy, how does it fit into the overall process? Yeah, so I actually think Brian described this well in that, county commissioners understand what needs and priorities they have. They determine if they have to raise taxes on our property. That isn't done lightly. And then that aspect of the budget fits into what also is available from the state.
Thank you. Another online question. This is on funding, and Candidate Raymaker, you'll go first, and then Candidate Mueller. Please explain connections you see between the government spending and community well-being. And Candidate Raymaker.
I think there is a very direct relationship between funding and community well-being. If the government chooses wisely to invest in our community, invest in both physical and human infrastructure, and they invest wisely, that contributes greatly to a thriving community. Many people overlook the aspect of funding human infrastructure, which is so important. I think that we see kind of a crisis happening in our care economy, and people, especially women, being left out of the workforce because there is not affordable daycare. And so the county choosing a specific role that is in the scope of what we do, working with nonprofits and for-profits, everybody has a role. Everybody has a role in solving how we make a community thrive, and the government should invest in both physical and human infrastructure.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller?
Yeah, I believe there is a correlation between money spent in the community, and it is important to have a recreational facilities for kids that are growing up, that it does make a big difference with when you're a team player with, say, a soccer team or a football team, just to get out and have people involved with one another does play a big factor. So yeah, spending the money on having programs like that would be important, I believe.
Thank you. We'll have another online question from an online, and this is about library and social services. And candidate Mueller, you'll go first, and then candidate Raymaker. If elected, would you support the part-time social worker position at the Rochester Public Library?
I guess I'm not familiar with this, but I'm willing to learn about what is involved with that. I'll have to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Raymaker?
I also would need to do a little bit more research as to the scope of funding for the Rochester Public Library and why that might be, in or out of scope for Olmsted County. I do think that public services distributed in our libraries are just so important to our communities. And so does the county potentially have some role? I'd like to search that a little bit more, but I do want to say that social services distributed at libraries is potentially a way to promote equity and deliver services at a place where you're meeting your clients where they are.
Thank you. Now we'll go to questions from our partners, Rochester Post-Bulletin and Randy Peterson. You'll have the next question.
The county has been pairing community outreach workers with city and county law enforcement. Is this a program that you would support expanding?
Oh, I am sorry. It is candidate Raymaker, I believe. Okay.
So Randy, the question was that, one more time, I'm sorry.
The county has been pairing community outreach workers with city and county law enforcement. Is this a program that you would support expanding?
I would look at the data. So I'm a very data-driven person, and so these programs would have had objectives. Somebody had the thought, which I think is a good starting thought, to pair people together. Teamwork always is better. And so I would be interested in learning what the original objectives were, what the original metrics were, and before I made a decision about whether I would continue to support that, are those programs meeting their objectives, or do they need to be tweaked and pivoted to something new?
Thank you.
Look forward to that.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller?
Question one more time, please.
The county has been pairing community outreach workers with city and county law enforcement. Is this a program that you would support expanding?
Yes, I would, because when you're out with the law enforcement, if you have somebody that can help de-escalate situations, and there are a lot of situations in the Rochester area, that is a plus. The mental health situation going on, I do believe that having somebody with some psychological skills doing that, I believe, would be beneficial.
Can I use a rebuttal?
Yes.
Building on that, or maybe countering to that, I think that there's strong evidence that says that rural farmers actually commit suicide at very high rates. And so the idea that the mental health crisis is in the city of Rochester and not actually really important for county commissioners to think of in our rural communities as well, that the mental health crisis and drug use is not in our rural communities. I think that would be a bias we wouldn't want to have as a county commissioner.
Thank you. And our next question will be the Chamber of Commerce, Jonathan Kroll.
What is your view on the current business environment here in Olmsted County? As County Commissioner, how would you work to ensure that Olmsted County is a place that businesses can grow and thrive?
And candidate Mueller, you'll go first, and then candidate Raymaker.
I'm not really familiar with a lot of the downtown businesses that are going on, but the rural, like I had said before, small town areas do need the funding with the, get Chamber of Commerce to get businesses that would be more affordable in the rural areas and small towns, because they do need to grow.
Thank you. Candidate Raymaker?
I think that our business community in this district has incredible opportunities. And I think that it's necessary for us to make sure that we are not doing anything at the government level that puts unnecessary regulation or restriction. That's not to say no regulation or restriction, but not any unnecessary. Because I think we've seen, all of us are experiencing supply chain disruptions. I know that, pairing the story, during the pandemic, my mom and dad knew so many farmers who had to unfortunately do very large kills of their herds. And the price of animals dropped through the floor. And this was so hard on the hearts of the farmers in our community. But we don't have the rural business infrastructure anymore to have small butcher shops, which used to thrive in these small communities. They just couldn't scale up fast enough. So we do need to look at if there are any regulations that are preventing us having businesses that would help shorten our supply chains and help make our supply chains more sustainable.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the League of Women Voters. I forgot to ask before the other partners. So this question is a collaboration with city and county. So in the question goes to candidate Raymaker first and then candidate Mueller. There is a general awareness that the county and the city of Rochester do not collaborate well. What could be done to improve coordination and collaboration between them and other local governments? And again, candidate Raymaker first.
I think this may be a little bit more of a public relations perception issue. I think that there is a lot of strong collaboration between the county and the city. I know I was the chair of the Olmsted County Human Rights Commission, and I had a lot of support and positive relationships with people in the city. And I would see that would continue in the future. But sometimes, we all kind of like to chit-chat in the grapevine. I think that a little bit of positive public relations about what's going on between Olmsted County and the city could benefit, because I think if you look around, in the previous session, we learned that Rochester is like the 6th best mid-sized city in the whole country. And so something has to be happening that's right.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller.
I guess I'm really not aware of the city and the county having any real disparities other than, maybe some minor clashes between different departments. So my plan would be to work with the city and deal with the expansion that's going to be going on.
Thank you. Our next question will be from the audience, and candidate Mueller, you'll go first, and then candidate Raymaker. Social services. Do you have any ideas for improving customer service at social services so people don't have to wait to speak to a real person? So I think there's a question about improving the customer service at social services.
Boy, I'm not familiar with that now, but I'll do some research on that because I do have a brother-in-law that is in social services, and there have been some issues, but it's not like we haven't been able to make contact with people. It's just delays. So, yeah, I'll have to do a little more research on that.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Raymaker.
So just, I might have my weeks mixed up, but just last Tuesday at the county commission meeting, which I sat in on, they actually did a presentation from the group who supports WIC, and then there was also another presentation jointly between HR and many different service areas in the county. And what the county learned that happened in the pandemic was that people had such better access to services, and they found that they were able to get what they need better through two measures, and that was telehealth and pop-up clinics. And the word clinic isn't necessarily clinical, but when the county does pop-up services close to where their clients are, so whether that means going to Chatfield or going to Dover or going physically to Stewartville, I think that the county would have a lot of opportunities to give better service through expanding telehealth and doing pop-up clinics.
Thank you. Our next question is from the audience, and it's on long-term care. And candidate Raymaker, you'll go first, and then candidate Mueller. What role, if any, can the county play in solving the crisis in long-term care?
Yes. You know, in other countries, the model for this is just so different. I think the county has to take a look at how we get this in the scope of our work, going back to that question about investing in infrastructure. When I knock doors, I'm hearing people talk about how devastating it is, how scary it is to be taking care of elderly parents who may have dementia along with their toddlers, and how having that mix in their house is not safe for any party. And how heartbreaking would that be to be the parent caught in the middle of taking care of your parents who you love and taking care of your children who you love, and having it be an unsafe environment. But the model, the revenue model for these long-term care facilities is where we have like a business model failure. And so the county does need to step in and start to understand how we could innovate and make some public-private partnerships to help solve this issue.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller?
Repeat the question again, please.
Yep. What role, if any, can the county play in solving the crisis in long-term care?
Well, for one, if people are able to stay in their homes at advanced ages, the housing, helping them stay in homes with maintenance so that they don't fall into disrepair. Hospice care is another one when they do get to a point where they need extra care because it is overwhelming just trying to care for one person with, say, dementia. The long-term care, I see the county has approved a long-term care facility for seniors, and I believe that's probably going to be the route we have to go. But I do believe if we can keep the homes in good order, I think that would also help with new housing or housing for new families, and can do a turnover of that sort. I guess that's kind of where I want to go with that.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to go with a question from the League of Women Voters. What projects, and candidate Mueller, you'll go first, and then candidate Raymaker. What projects would you, as a county commissioner, hope for in a state bonding bill?
Oh, definitely the Highway 14, County 44 access. I'd have to say that'd be the main one that I'd be looking for.
Thank you. Candidate Raymaker?
I would hope for, in a bonding bill, something that would address the crisis in our care economy.
Thank you. And now we will have a question from the Rochester Post-Bulletin, Randy Peterson. And it'll be candidate Raymaker, candidate Mueller.
A recent Olmsted County survey showed affordable housing and taxes are residents' highest priority, highest concerns. Of the two issues, which do you see as the top priority to be addressed, and how would you seek to respond to it?
I believe that I would first seek to respond to the crisis in affordable housing. Residents do care about how their tax dollars are used, but many residents understand that if we invest wisely and if the government stays in their lane and allows businesses to do what businesses do best and nonprofits to do what nonprofits do best, but for the government to play a role in the underlying infrastructure to make sure that, once again, that we aren't doing anything at the county level with regulations that would prohibit innovation of businesses, to have public-private relationships to make sure that our supply chains get shorter and perhaps invest short-term in some of that innovation. I don't think that people don't want to invest in our community. I think that they want us to be very wise with their tax dollars.
Thank you. Candidate Mueller?
Repeat the question, please.
A recent county survey shows affordable housing and taxes are residents' highest concerns. Of the two issues, which do you see as the top priority to be addressed, and how would you seek to respond to it?
I guess the affordable housing, if we go into our rural areas again, the smaller towns, we can hopefully set up more affordable housing. The housing in downtown, it's going to be, or in Rochester, is going to be difficult to lower prices, and taxes are still going to be high that way. That's, I guess, really one of the only options we really have for affordable housing.
Thank you. Now we'll have a question from the chamber. Jonathan Kroll.
What is a priority that you believe is essential to the financial stability of Olmsted County moving forward? And what strategies do you recommend to encourage that potential stability and facilitate future community development?
And candidate Mueller first, and then candidate Raymaker.
I guess I'm not going to have an answer for that. I just don't know.
Candidate Raymaker.
I think that the priority is to maintain the strong bond status that we have. Olmsted County manages its budget and its funding very, very well. We have a very high bond rating, which allows us to borrow money at lower interest rates. So making sure that we continue to be good stewards of the budget that we have is probably one of the very best investments that we have that undergirds our ability to be in a strong financial position.
Thank you. This is an online question, and it's on the environment. And this will be candidate Raymaker first, and then candidate Mueller. Olmsted County recently piloted a soil health program using $3 million of American Rescue Plan Act dollars. The program is designed to keep both topsoil on farms and protect our surface waters and aquifers below. Do you support continued prioritization of programs to protect soil health, rivers, streams, and our aquifers? And candidate Raymaker.
Yes, absolutely. I support programs like this. If we don't take care of the water that is in our community, we are known in Olmsted County as being a community of wellness, a community of healing. And how would that not only impact each of our lives, but the reputation of the community that we have of being a healthy community? If we could not have farmers that can produce crops, if we can't keep our farming community here in Olmsted County strong, I don't think that we will be able to maintain a healthy community. So the short answer is yes, I would support those things.
Thank you. And candidate Mueller.
Yes, I definitely would support. That's the $3 million with the ARPA funds. It's a 3-year stint, I believe. 1 year used for cover crops, and the second year for alternate crops, and then the third year for grazing and haying. Now, the intention, of course, a lot of this would come through soil and water. The intention is to keep erosion from getting into our streams, the topsoil, and I don't know any farmers that want to lose their topsoil. With that being said, it is a lot of work, and there is a lot of money that does need to be spent keeping waterways, get the topsoil moved back into the waterways. So it is an ongoing issue. I guess I would support it.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes our question portion of our forum this evening. We will now hear the closing statements from each candidate. Candidates, you will have 2 minutes to speak, and candidate Brian Mueller, you'll go first.
Thank you. In closing, I appreciate the opportunity the League of Women Voters has given us to speak on these issues. They provide a great service for the community. I also thank the Post Bulletin and the Chamber of Commerce for their input. I am a lifelong learner that listens and has years of experience. Being self-employed for 30 years, I'm able to scale back on large projects and work and devote my free time to researching and dealing with issues that pertain to county programs. District 4 is such a large district with 11 townships and 4 cities. I can make the time to interact with rural communities that need to be represented at the county level. Thank you, and vote November 8th. My website is www.mueller4district4.com, and my phone number is 507-254-1995. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Mueller. And now candidate Raymaker.
Yes, I'd like to express my appreciation for our host tonight. Thank you very much to the Rochester Public Library, the League of Women Voters, and to the Rochester Chamber. I'm really excited about what the future looks like for Olmsted County and all of the cities that are included in Olmsted County. I think what I bring to this role is experience that I have in ideation and experience that I have in understanding that you have to be innovative and future thinking. So my experience is in thinking of new programs and working with experts. In this role, you don't have to always be the expert, but it is helpful to have that management experience and that leadership experience. I have been doing that my whole 20-year career. People have entrusted me with leadership positions, and I have grown that over my 20-year career. I really am looking forward to what rural and urban District 4 can look like and how we can make it thrive and how we can make people understand that we need each other. There does not need to be a rural-urban divide. There are many, many Rochester residents in this community, but there's also vast rural land, and we have the opportunity to really bring people together. My background in a lot of the equity and inclusion work that I do is about bringing people together to talk about difficult things. And I think that that's something that's needed in this district particularly to help us understand how we need each other and how really 80 to 90% of the things that we all need are things we agree on.
Thank you, and thank you, candidates. That concludes our forum this evening. I would like to thank each of the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and for your willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. I would like to remind you that the views expressed in the forum tonight were those of the candidates, not LWV Rochester or any partner or sponsor of the forum. LWV posts complete, unedited recordings of these forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan political purposes. Thanks to our partners, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, the Rochester Post Bulletin, and the Rochester Public Library. Remember that Election Day is November 8th and that early voting has begun. Get out there and vote. And if you have a question about your polling place, would like to see your sample ballot or learn more about the candidates, visit vote411.org. And please note your polling place may have changed due to redistricting. To see this forum again, access the forums from LWV Rochester or the Rochester Public Library website. And there's also information and the brochures that you picked up and the Vote 411 flyers that you see here. Thank you all for coming this evening. Have a good night.